There is a strange paradox at the center of human life. The harder we try to become someone, the further we seem to drift from who we truly are. We spend years building an identity, protecting it, defending it, polishing it like armor for the world to see. We want to be respected, admired, recognized. We want our voices to be heard, our achievements to be seen, our presence to matter. And yet, in the quiet moments of the night, when the noise of the world fades, a question sometimes appears in the silence. Who am I beneath all of this? More than 8 centuries ago, the Persian mystic Jalal ad-Din Muhammad Rumi spoke about this very mystery. But he did not approach it the way philosophers usually do. He did not offer definitions or arguments. Instead, he pointed to something far more unsettling and far more liberating. He suggested that the person we spend so much time protecting may not be who we really are at all. Rumi called this false center the ego. Not simply pride or arrogance, but the invisible structure of stories we carry about ourselves. The ego says, "This is who you are. This is what you deserve. This is what others must think of you." It creates roles, labels, and boundaries. It tells you where you belong and where you do not. It measures, compares, fears, competes, and slowly, without realizing it, we begin to live inside the narrow walls it builds. But Rumi saw something deeper within the human being, something vast, quiet, and impossible to confine. To him, the ego was not the true self. It was only a temporary shadow covering something far more luminous. This is why Rumi often spoke about the strange idea of disappearing. At first, this sounds frightening. In a world that constantly tells us to stand out, to prove ourselves, to strengthen our identity, the idea of disappearing feels almost like a loss. But Rumi was not speaking about erasing your existence. He was speaking about dissolving the illusion that hides your true nature. Imagine a drop of water that believes it is separate from the ocean. The drop fears evaporation, fears being lost, fears merging with something greater. It clings tightly to its small shape, convinced that survival means remaining exactly what it is. But the moment that drop falls into the ocean, something extraordinary happens. It does not vanish into nothingness. It becomes the ocean itself. For Rumi, the ego is like that drop, afraid of dissolving because it believes dissolution means death. But the mystic knows a secret the ego cannot understand. What disappears is not your true self. What disappears is only the illusion that you were small. And yet, this illusion is powerful. From childhood, we are taught to construct an identity. We are given names, roles, expectations. We learn what earns approval and what invites rejection. Little by little, we assemble a version of ourselves that feels safe enough to present to the world. But over time, this constructed self becomes heavy. It must constantly be defended. If someone criticizes it, we feel wounded. If someone ignores it, we feel invisible. If someone surpasses it, we feel threatened. The ego survives through comparison, and comparison quietly poisons the peace of the heart. Rumi observed this restless struggle with deep compassion. He saw how human beings exhaust themselves trying to maintain an identity that was never meant to carry the weight of their existence. And so his teachings point toward a radical shift, not toward strengthening the ego, but toward seeing through it. The moment you begin to observe the ego, something subtle happens. You realize that the voice in your head, the one that constantly comments, judges, worries, and narrates your life, is not the entirety of who you are. It is only a layer of the mind, repeating patterns it learned long ago. Behind that voice, there is something quieter, a presence that watches the thoughts without being trapped inside them, a stillness that remains even when emotions rise and fall. Rumi believed that this silent awareness is far closer to your true nature than the identity you struggle to protect. But the ego fears this discovery, because the moment you begin to see it clearly, its authority weakens. The stories it tells about who you must be begin to loosen their grip. And suddenly, the rigid boundaries of the self start to soften. This is why the spiritual path, according to Rumi, often feels like a kind of unraveling. The person you believed yourself to be begins to dissolve piece by piece. Old certainties fade. Familiar identities lose their importance. And for a moment you may feel as though you are standing in an empty space between who you were and who you are becoming. Yet Rumi would say this emptiness is not a mistake. It is the doorway, because the doorway to truth is rarely built from certainty. More often it appears in the quiet collapse of what we once believed about ourselves. Jalal ad-Din Muhammad Rumi understood that the ego survives by creating a constant sense of solidity. It wants you to feel fixed, defined, finished. It whispers that you must protect your identity, defend your opinions, guard your importance. In this way, the ego convinces you that your survival depends on maintaining the image you have built. But Rumi saw that this image is fragile, precisely because it is artificial. Have you ever noticed how quickly your sense of self can change, depending on the situation? One moment you feel confident, admired, certain of your place in the world. Then a single criticism arrives, and suddenly doubt enters the heart. A small rejection, and the identity begins to tremble. This instability reveals something important. What can be shaken so easily was never your deepest foundation. The ego is like a house built from mirrors. It reflects opinions, roles, achievements, failures, but it has no true center of its own. This is why people who live entirely from the ego often feel restless even when they succeed. No accomplishment is ever enough. No recognition ever fully satisfies. The ego feeds on validation, yet it can never be nourished for long. Rumi would say that this endless hunger is not a flaw in human nature. It is a signal pointing toward something deeper. The soul is not satisfied by praise or status because it was not created for those things. It longs for something far more intimate. Union with truth. But this union requires something the ego fears above all else: surrender. Surrender does not mean weakness. It does not mean abandoning intelligence or responsibility. It means releasing the illusion that the small self must control everything. It means trusting that beneath the noise of our mental struggles, there is a greater intelligence quietly guiding life. Rumi often used the metaphor of the reed flute. The flute produces its haunting music only because it has been hollowed out. If it were still solid, full of itself, no melody could pass through it. In the same way, the human heart must become empty of ego so that something more beautiful can move through it. This is why many of the greatest transformations in life begin with loss. The loss of certainty, the loss of identity, the loss of the person we thought we had to be. At first, these moments feel like destruction. The ego panics, believing it is disappearing. But Rumi would gently remind us that what is breaking is only the shell. Inside the shell, something far more alive is waiting. When the ego begins to loosen its grip, a different kind of awareness appears. You begin to notice how many of your reactions were automatic, how often pride pushed you to defend yourself unnecessarily, how often fear made you hide your true thoughts, how often comparison stole your peace. With this awareness comes a quiet freedom. You no longer feel the same urgency to prove yourself. Conversations become lighter because your identity is no longer at stake in every disagreement. Success becomes enjoyable, but not defining. Failure becomes painful, but not devastating. Slowly, the center of gravity within you begins to shift. Instead of living from the fragile structure of the ego, you begin living from something deeper, something spacious and calm. It is the same still presence that watches your thoughts, the same awareness that remains even when emotions change. Rumi believed that this presence is the doorway to the divine within the human heart. But the path toward this realization is not always comfortable. The ego resists dissolution the way a shadow resists the arrival of light. It clings to familiar patterns, to old identities, to the belief that control equals safety. And yet, every time you choose humility instead of pride, the ego softens. Every time you listen instead of needing to be right, it weakens. Every time you allow life to unfold without forcing your image upon it, another layer falls away. Little by little, the person you thought you were begins to fade, and something far more real begins to emerge. And as that deeper self begins to emerge, something surprising happens. Life does not become smaller when the ego fades. It becomes wider, richer, more alive. The world you once experienced through tension and comparison slowly begins to feel different. The same situations appear, the same people cross your path, the same challenges arise, but the one who is experiencing them is no longer trapped inside the narrow walls of the ego. Jalal ad-Din Muhammad Rumi often suggested that what we call losing ourselves is actually the moment we begin to find our true nature. Because the ego was never the center of who we are. It was only a mask, a story carefully repeated until we believed it. Think about how much energy the ego requires to survive. It must constantly compare itself with others. It must defend its opinions, protect its image, maintain its position. It fears being ignored, fears being wrong, fears being less than someone else. In this endless effort to protect itself, it quietly drains the joy from life. But when that structure begins to dissolve, something much lighter appears. You start to realize that not every criticism requires a defense. Not every disagreement requires a battle. Not every moment needs to confirm your importance. The heart becomes more spacious, more relaxed, more curious. Instead of guarding an identity, you begin participating in life. Rumi believed that this transformation allows love to move more freely through us. Not love as possession or attachment, but love as openness. When the ego softens, the invisible barriers between you and others begin to fade. You see more clearly that everyone you meet is carrying their own fears, their own wounds, their own search for meaning. Compassion grows naturally in this understanding. You stop seeing the world only through the lens of me and mine. Instead, you begin to sense a deeper connection running quietly beneath all things. The same life that breathes through you breathes through everyone else. The same mystery that moves the stars is present in every heartbeat. And this realization brings a profound kind of freedom. Because if your true nature is not the fragile identity you built, then you are no longer limited by it. You are not confined to the labels others gave you. You are not trapped by the mistakes of your past. You're not required to keep performing the same version of yourself forever. You are something far more fluid, far more alive. Rumi would say that the moment the ego steps aside, even briefly, the soul begins to breathe again. Creativity flows more easily. Kindness appears without effort. Gratitude becomes natural. Life itself starts to feel less like a struggle and more like a dance. This does not mean the ego disappears completely. It still appears from time to time, whispering its old stories, asking for recognition, wanting to prove something to the world. But now you recognize its voice. You see it for what it is, a small part of the mind, not the master of your being. And the more you observe it, the less power it holds. Little by little, the person you believed you had to be begins to fade into the background. In its place, something quieter and wiser takes the lead. A presence that does not need to compete, does not need to pretend, does not need to constantly prove its value. This is the paradox Rumi wanted us to see. When you disappear from the illusion of the ego, you do not become nothing. You become something much closer to the truth of who you are. So perhaps the real question is not how to become someone greater, stronger, or more impressive. Perhaps the real question is how to let go of the small self that has been standing in the way all along. And if this reflection awakened something in you, if these ideas made you pause, think, or look a little deeper into your own life, then you are already walking the path that Rumi spoke about centuries ago. If you enjoy exploring wisdom like this, timeless ideas that invite us to understand ourselves and life more deeply, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Give the video a like if it resonated with you, and share it with someone who might need to hear this message today. Because sometimes a single idea, arriving at the right moment, can quietly begin to transform the way we see ourselves and the way we live.